Hello everyone, this is Professor Kozluk here. So normally I make videos about current events, political science issues, but with about a month to go before college students are back in the classroom, I wanted to put together a series of videos talking about some tips from a faculty member that I want to see students utilize to succeed. So I've made one video in this series already. This will be the second video, but if you missed the first one, I'm Joseph Kozluk. I've taught political science at the university, at community college, and at the Air Force Academy, combined for 6 years now. So from that experience, I wanted to share some of the tips to try to help students succeed. These videos are probably most useful for students just starting their college career. Maybe if it's at a community college or a four-year university, these tips, these tricks will help you. If you're a junior in high school, a junior in college, hopefully you've utilized these tips already. So in this video, I wanted to dig deeper into a subject that seems so blatantly obvious, and that's the number one key to success is attending class. Attending class. This seems so obvious. You're signing up for a class. You're paying for it. You're paying a lot of money at university, at colleges, even at community college, to be able to attend class. Make sure you're utilizing that. And I know as the semester moves along, students get busy and they're like, oh, I can skip this class, I can miss this class. But the greatest indicator of high GPAs, will you graduate from university, will you graduate from college, will you graduate from community college, is attending class. So we know research backs this up. Students that regularly attend class have higher GPAs, so a higher grade point average. Grade GPAs aren't everything in college, but if you want to go to graduate school, if you want to transfer to another university, having a high GPA is important. Maybe when you graduate, you will apply to a job and they'll ask to see your transcripts. You want to be able to show that you put in the work and you had a solid university career. That all starts with attending class. So when you attend class, you have better retention of information. You'll hear it, you'll see it, you'll write it if you take notes, and that helps you remember it. Now, depending on what your major is, your classroom environment, your classroom experience will be different. So I teach political science, and I do not like to stand in front of the class and just lecture. I want a discussion in the classroom. We read the material before class and then we discuss it. We try to make sense of the world around us together. To me, that is the best learning environment. So what that means is the students need to be there, obviously. Other classrooms, maybe you're in a field that does more lectures, maybe a hard science or a math where it's a more traditional lecture. Well, then that's still important to be there. You might not be engaging as much and interacting as much with your colleagues and your classmates and the professor, but you're still listening to the material. You're hearing what the professor thinks is the most important stuff. So even in my classroom, which is very discussion-based, we've ideally all read the material together, we come to class. And if you are there, you're understanding what I think is the most important pieces of the material. Well, what does that mean? That's more likely to be on the exam. You understand what the main pieces of the reading, what the main takeaways of the reading are. So that's important. So if it's a lecture or a discussion-based class, being there will help prepare you for exams, for homework assignments. You'll remember the material better. You'll have an insight into what your professor thinks is the most important piece of the reading. So right there, you already have a step up from your colleagues, your classmates who maybe don't attend class. So now I mentioned it at the start, but college is expensive. Make sure you're getting your money's worth, going to class, participating in that environment. you're getting your money's worth. If you're not attending class, sure, you might still pass the class, but maybe you don't get as much out of that. And then you'll go on to harder classes or other classes where you should have built those skills already in some of those earlier classes, and maybe you skip that and you missed that because you weren't in class. So that, I know it seems so simple to say, oh yeah, going to class is the most obvious thing, but it really is. It's the number one tip I give. When I'm meeting prospective students who are thinking about coming to Northern Colorado, I talk to them about the importance of coming to class and how you benefit from attending class. When I meet with parents, if it's prospective students and the student is meeting with me and the parents are meeting with me, we have the same discussion about how important it is to attend class. You get more out of it, and you're going to meet people. So maybe you're going to a college or a university far from your hometown, or maybe where you don't have a lot of friends, or maybe a lot of your friends didn't go to the same university. And it can be daunting. When I talk to students, I know they give me this feedback about it's hard to meet people. Well, in a separate video, we'll talk about doing clubs and doing organizations, but just going to class, you'll meet people. Especially in a class like mine where it's very discussion based, you're meeting people in the class around you. And then maybe you have some friends on campus. Right there, you're learning more and you're making connections with your colleagues. Maybe connections that will take you to other classes together and for post-graduation. You'll have connections then. So it's very important. So if you skip class, not only are you missing out on the material, but you're also missing out on building that community with your classmates. And I know I mentioned it, but you'll get a feel for what the professor finds to be most important. So being a political scientist, I teach in the social sciences. We read a lot of material. What we're talking about in class is only a piece of it, but clearly what I thought was the most important pieces of the reading. Well, that gives you a head start on thinking about what's going to be on the midterm, what's going to be on the final, what do I think is most important for helping you set up for your homework assignments. These are little things that will help you succeed that maybe you didn't even think about. If we have a lot of reading, there's no way we're going to cover it all in class, but you have a head start on knowing what I think is the most important. So when we think about why students miss class, and it happens. Some of my classes, sometimes students miss. I've taught at several universities. It happens. It happens everywhere. You hear students say, like, I'll catch up or I'll do the reading on my own. That's true. You can still do the reading. But then what does that mean? It means you're already behind. And so if you're just going to try to do it on your own, then you have to maybe spend more time trying to make sense of the material, and then you're behind. So what happens then? You get further behind. Maybe you do it in a few classes and you get further behind and further behind. And that can be hard to get caught up from, and it can be stressful. University can be stressful. So we're trying to minimize the stress that you're going through. Keeping up with the reading, attending classes, staying on top of your work is beneficial to students. Your mental health will be better if you're keeping up with the reading, if you're keeping up with being there. So something I hear from students at times is that they're tired, and this is understandable, and this is part of college. This is just a reality. Modern day college students, maybe you're going to school and you're working and you have family commitments, but being able to build in that time management of, okay, I have to make my education, I have to make attending class a priority. I'm paying a lot of money. It's beneficial for my education to be there. I have to find time to be there. So even when you're tired, if you can fight through that, even if it's a day where you're maybe not as chatty in class, being in class is important. So on that note, note taking while in class, this has evolved. So if my audience watching this is a little older, like maybe I am, or maybe older than me, note taking has evolved. Where when I started college, we still took notes in a notebook. You didn't see a lot of laptops in the classroom. Today, that is massively and drastically different. A ton of laptops, very minimal note taking. So I would say that the best is still handwritten notes, but the reality is students just don't handwrite their notes as much anymore. What that means is, of course, handwritten notes are the best. Laptop notes are still good, but being there and even just listening to the discussion, the lecture, listening to what is going on in the classroom. Ideally, you're taking notes, but even just listening and thinking about, okay, how am I connecting what I read to what we're talking about? You're already setting yourself up for success. You're setting yourself up for a higher GPA. You're setting yourself up to better relationships with your professor, where if you want to go to graduate school, maybe you're thinking long term. Well, I know what I want, and it requires a graduate degree. Being in class and getting to know your professor allows us to be able to write you better letters of recommendation. If we know our students, we can write you a better letter of recommendation. So this is all building on just attending class. So another thing that as professors we've certainly heard, students don't like to go to class because that class is boring. And that can be true. I think as professors we all try to make our class not boring, but sometimes it is. I try to get around that by having a lot of discussion in the classroom. Again, I don't want to just lecture to students because that's not what I'm good at. I'm better at facilitating discussions and getting students engaged and getting students thinking. But that can still be boring for some students, I'm sure, who don't care at all about political science. But you still want to try to push through that. Try to find something meaningful in the class. Try to find, okay, well, how does this connect to my life? And this is what I try to help my students understand, why learning about political science matters to them, even if they're not a political science major. And so if we can make that connection, and you as a student, if you can think about, okay, how does this actually matter to what I want to do? I want to be a biologist, or I want to be whatever it is. How does this class in American government help me? And if you can find that connection, you can try to figure out, okay, Professor Kozluk's saying this, I know he wants me to pick this up because this is why it matters. And then you'll be able to get something out of that. And then hopefully the class isn't boring. So that can be tough. If you're a freshman, if you're a first year student, you might be taking a lot of classes that are outside your major that seem kind of boring. There's always a way to try to make that as interesting as possible. And if you're skipping class, if you're cutting class, you won't be able to make those connections. You'll just be stuck with the textbook, which maybe you think is boring. And then you get behind, and then that's when you struggle. So, okay. So how do we make sure we're actually getting to class? Set your schedule like a job. When you graduate and you have your 4-year degree or your 2-year degree, your employer will expect you to be there. Treat university like that. And I know that can be tough because maybe it's students' first time with some freedom, and no one's going to call you if you cut class. No one's going to come scold you. But treat going to class, treat having attendance just like you would a job. Okay, I have to be there for 50 minutes on a Monday. Do that. I'm sure many students, I know many of my students have jobs. You have to be there for those jobs. You can use social accountability, others in class who expect you to be there. I don't do a lot of group work in my classes, but maybe you're in a class that has a lot of group work and you're meeting people to work with. Have some accountability that you make sure your friend is in class and they make sure you are in class. That just that helps. So this doesn't mean that you'll never miss a class. Trust me, everybody misses classes. Maybe your car broke down or it's snowing. Like, these things happen. And professors know these things happen. I'm sure your professor, regardless of what class, will have some sort of attendance policy built into their syllabus. It could be that they don't take attendance. There's no grade for it, they don't take attendance, and then it's completely up to you whether or not you go to class. In my classes, I do have an attendance policy where it's built in a piece of your grade, usually between 10 and 15%, is just coming to class, and usually there's a component about participation, but the big chunk of it is, are you coming to class? You're being rewarded just for coming to class. So if it's a class where you don't have to, and there's no like attendance policies, that might make it a little harder to make it to class, but still do the best you can. Have a friend who will hold you accountable, treat it like a job, because we know the benefits are there. Higher GPAs, higher likelihood of finishing university. You learn more. Part of going to university is preparing for your career, and part of it is just learning. So you are a more well-rounded adult when you leave university. You understand more about the world. So as you're entering the job market, you have this broad understanding of the world. Maybe you're a better writer and a better reader and a better researcher and a better thinker. These things are all rooted in coming to class and engaging with the professor and engaging with your colleagues. So if you can do that, you're well on your way to success. So, okay, thank you for watching if you made it to the end. Remember, attendance, number one tip I give. Even if you're not feeling it that day, get to class. It'll benefit you in the long run. Okay, thank you.